Oh, hiya! Welcome back to In Order of Preference, a show in which I talk about a director, an actor, a musician, a general artist, and rank their work in order of my preference. Yippee! Cards on the table. I'm really nervous about today's video because today I'm going to be talking about Radiohead. Yes, that's right, the Tom York-led titan of British rock music, Radiohead, one of, if not my favourite band of all time. The reason I'm nervous is because Radio's fan base is terrifying, in all honesty. They are a strongly opinionated group of people. Frank Turner once described them as the Beliebers of alt-rock, and to this day I haven't been able to disagree. But hopefully no feelings will be hurt by this list at the end of the day. It is just my opinion, and art is subjective, and hopefully we can all walk away having had a perfectly pleasant time. Sound good? Sounds good to me. Let's get started! Here's the thing about Radiohead's debut record, Pablo Honey. In my opinion, this still holds up. This is still a genuinely good record, it's just outdated. Everything about this is so aggressively 90s, more so than the other records they released in this decade combined. It is drenched in angst, she is dripping, but also rinsed of all of the originality that Radiohead would exhibit on every record subsequent. There are still building blocks of Radiohead's greats apparent on Pablo Honey though. Johnny Greenwood's erratic and innovative guitar riffs, Tom York's haunting and introspective lyrics, as well as his searing vocal capabilities. His scream of a high note in the middle of the album's opening track, You, is still one of my favourite Radiohead moments. And come on, we have to address the elephant in the room here. It's the album that gave us Creep, and even though the fanbase liked to shit on it, there's no denying that this was a monumental song in alt-rock history. The thing is about this album is it is just so different and forgettable compared to their usual material that it feels almost redundant in their discography, which is why it lands at the bottom of my list. If you enjoy your 90s sad guitar rock, this may float your boat a lot more than other albums in Radiohead's discography. I feel like from the start of the noughties to the start of the 2010s, every Radiohead album that was released during that time boasted larger-than-life ideas, ambition in every performance, their production, their lyrics, as well as a great deal of momentum. Whatever they wanted you to experience would be in the forefront, or easy to identify from the intricate layers. 2011's The King of Limbs, however, does not have the same ambition or momentum. Most of these songs, while still innovative and original, are a step down from what the band had been releasing for so long. I wasn't so much met with a feeling of anger or upset towards this album, I was just aggressively indifferent towards it, which is not what I want from a Radiohead album. I want a Radiohead album to move me, or to impress me, or to challenge me, or to make me think differently in any way, big or small. This just felt like Radiohead with limited resources or time, and that's hard to ignore and not let ruin your experience when you're so used to the standard of their previous records. Saying that though, this record still has its moments. The brass section in Codex, inject it into my veins! But unfortunately, most of the album is sadly pretty forgettable. Amnesiac is an album that I feel like I'm missing something about. When it hits me good. From the string swells on Pyramid Song, to the funky as hell bass line and synth melodies on I Might Be Wrong, to the brass and woodwind solos on Life in a Glass House. This album is littered with little gems, but my problem is when they come together as a collective. Nathan Zed released an incredibly accurate video discussing the importance of album sequencing earlier this year, and I think that's where Amnesiac falls short. The arrangement of the track listing doesn't feel as smooth as I'd like it to, and it feels like it drags a little bit as well. While Radiohead often dabble in these melancholy colour palettes, I always find this one so submerged in them, but lacking the momentum or the climaxes that other albums of theirs do. I know I'm probably pissing a lot of people off by saying that, and I can totally see why it's a lot of people's favourite Radiohead record. It just doesn't do it for me. 5 years after the release of The King of Limbs, Radiohead released A Moon-Shaped Pool, a deeply subtle and quiet yet immersive and mesmerising record that I must admit I did not see coming. This felt like a direction I wasn't expecting Radiohead to go in, very much deviating from a lot of the ideas conceived on King of Limbs, and returning to a lot of the influences apparent on albums like In Rainbows and Kid A, while also showing a great deal of progression, not only in the music's quality, but also in its momentum. I remember hearing Burn the Witch for the first time and thinking, holy fuck, this is really special. And the album is also very special, especially in the shimmering intimacy it manages to achieve, which is not unlike the atmosphere on In Rainbows. The only reason for the slightly lower ranking is honestly just a matter of preference. While I can appreciate the technical brilliance of A Moon-Shaped Pool, it's just an album I don't find myself going back to that often. I also think I'm missing something when it comes to Hail to the Thief, but for the opposite reason. I always see this album near the bottom of people's lists, and I think it is such an underrated album in Radiohead's catalogue. Although it overstays its welcome somewhat in its length, Hail to the Thief is a haunting, hypnotising, and stunning record. It is arguably a little less challenging and a little bit more accessible than their previous two albums, but it still demonstrates a great deal of prowess in its performances and creates a claustrophobic, throttling atmosphere through its production and lyrics that I think is exclusive to this record in their discography, at least to such a prominent level. This is also one of Radiohead's most emotionally desperate and intense records, in my opinion, second only to OK Computer, and I just love when an album absolutely fucking destroys me that way. This will probably piss people off, it's The Bends, baby! The Bends is Radiohead's second studio album, and much like Pablo Honey, she's dripping in angst! It's also much more compliant to the guidelines of Britpop at that time, rather than the boundary-pushing dynamics of the rest of their catalogue. But listen, this thing is probably the definitive comfort record to me. Enough of what make Radiohead one of the most exciting British bands of all time, but also the accessibility that gave them the platform they have today. Like I said, this record is another angst fest. I feel like I may have used the word dripping once or twice. But this album is angsty in a much more controlled and delicate way where it matters, and then it's also completely ridiculous and disruptive where it can be. In terms of sequencing, this ebbs and flows in the most perfect way, both thematically and musically consistent. I really urge you to not sleep on the Radiohead. I really urge you to not sleep on The Bends, even if you much prefer their later records. It really is such an important record in their discography, and I believe everything after The Bends wouldn't have happened if it weren't for it. It took me a long time to actually listen to Kid A, and I'm not completely sure why. I think I was told that Kid A was kind of the pivotal moment for Radiohead, their first step into more obscure ideas and sounds, and I was put off by this because I was still under a blanket crying to fake plastic trees. Lol was. I still fucking am. Perpetually. But man, I was really missing out when I was dismissing this, huh? This thing is wild. The extremes it reaches are something to behold. Kid A is beautiful and ambient one minute and absolutely chaotic and grand the next. This was Radiohead's first record that started to rely primarily on electronics for certain songs, and I do think it's the Radiohead album that does it in the most effective way. Idiotech might be my favourite Radiohead song of all time, I just can't find a single fault about it. What should have felt like a more radical change in their music, Kid A just feels like a natural step forward and an elevation of their quality and a major expansion of the band's capabilities. I know I just talked about how Kid A was a major step up for the band, but I really need to incorporate OK Computer's impact on myself and music in general here. OK Computer is a revolutionary record, a total game changer for alt-rock, and still used as a benchmark for records of the genre today. This thing still feels so ahead of its time to me. If a band released this next year, it would just be as sonically, thematically, and instrumentally relevant as it was before. While it playfully revisits its indie rock roots on songs like Electioneering and Letdown, this is Radiohead's triumphant departure from that era, as they usher in a completely new standard for the genre. Songs like Paranoid Android and Climbing Up the Wall, still tearing me a new arsehole every time, as well as Karma Police and No Surprises, also tearing me a new arsehole every time, but sad. This is a perfect album to me, and I can't tell you how close it was to topping the list. It was such a tough decision between my top two, but I had to follow my heart. Yep, I am one of them. In Rainbows is nothing short of a masterpiece, a transcendent experience. The musical equivalent of a warm blanket in a flat in Scotland without central heating. Mine. Every single beat on this record is spot on. Not a second is wasted. Almost 15 years since the release of their debut, Radiohead released one of the most comforting and equally heartbreaking records I've ever had the pleasure of hearing. The production on this thing is stunning. It makes it so much more of an intimate experience, the world forming around you as you listen. I do have a deeply personal connection to this record. As someone who deals with great deals of anxiety, this record is a perfect comfort for those times. Even on its most aggressive songs, probably Body Snatchers and Jigsaw falling into place, In Rainbows is a beautifully understated album. It takes up exactly as much space as it needs and doesn't add anything extra for the sake of it. I can't fully articulate why this album is such an excellent one, because I think it is predominantly a personal experience thing, so I heavily advise you to experience it for yourself, because if you're anything like me, it will transport you, move you, and inspire you, all at the same time. I made it. We're good. I wasn't attacked by any diehard fans. Yet. Check on me in the morning. Thank you for checking out my silly little channel. It would mean a lot to me if you gave this video a wee like and subscribed if you enjoyed it. I tried to make videos every week, but obviously lives are endless balls of chaos and time is a construct, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks so much, you have a good day.